What's up, everybody? My name is Nick Risner. You can find me on Twitter at Nick Risner, Nickrizner. I'm the host of the MMA Mad podcast, and the question today is, can Donald Cerrone defeat Conor McGregor at UFC 246? Of course he can, right? He's a great striker. He's got a really well-rounded ground game. He's dangerous everywhere. He's been in the sport for a long, long time. It's as tough as they come. Of course he can defeat Conor McGregor. But if he does, it'll be the most shocking, actually, the first shocking upset of Conor McGregor's entire career. So to better understand that, let's take a closer look at Conor McGregor's other losses, right? The first two came very early in his career. That happens. People lose when they're young and they're on the come up. It's not boxing, right? This just happens in MMA. You can almost write those off because of that alone. Then he went on to win 15 fights in a row, including 2 UFC titles and 2 Cage Warrior titles. So obviously the run after that was great. You can take those first 2 losses and just throw them away. They don't matter. That, of course, brings us to Nate Diaz, his first loss in, recent years. And that, to me, wasn't surprising at all, right? He was a guy who'd been in the sport for a long time. He's not going to be susceptible to the mind games that McGregor brings to the table against all his other opponents. He also, just straight up stylistically, is a nightmare matchup. Conor is a fast starter. Nate Diaz has all this endurance and this ability to come on stronger in the later rounds that really is kind of a nightmare for McGregor, not to mention the fact that he's one of the most durable fighters. Hardly ever gets finished. And if he does, it's very, very, very rarely by knockout, right? Which is McGregor's really only path to a stoppage victory. He has some submissions, but at the UFC level, I don't see Conor getting submissions unless it's like, a knockdown, the guy's kind of half out and he happens to rear naked choke him or something. For the most part, Conor's a knockout guy, and Nate Diaz is a guy that doesn't get knocked out. And unfortunately, when you pour that much energy into knocking a guy like that out early, you're going to burn out, which makes it all the more impressive that he came back and avenged that loss. But that's the first loss of his career. Like I said, not surprised. I think most diehard fans, analysts, weren't surprised either. And obviously, based on the post-fight comments, Nate Diaz also not surprised by the outcome of that one. But that was Conor's first loss, right? And then, of course, Conor went on to avenge that loss, right? So you can almost wipe that one off. Although the initial loss itself, even by itself, wasn't surprising to me. As I mentioned, he then went on to defeat Eddie Alvarez, win that lightweight belt, right? So he avenged the loss, wins the lightweight belt. By the way, for those keeping score at home, that's 10 fights in the UFC and 9 post-fight bonuses in that 10-fight stretch, which is crazy. And the one that he didn't win a post-fight bonus for was the Max Holloway fight, which, for my money, the Max Holloway fight was almost the most impressive one because he tore his ACL in the second round, went on to still win the third round, went for the takedown, held top position. Never mind how good Max Holloway has been since that fight, obviously, long run as the featherweight champion. Wipe that out of there, right? Even with that understanding, just the fact that he tore his ACL and was still able to win the third round, I mean, unbelievable. So that was the one he didn't win a post-fight bonus for. So it's basically one of the best 10-fight streaks you can possibly have in the UFC. And finally, we had Khabib, who, for my money, is the best pound-for-pound fighter in the UFC right now. And honestly, I remember that fight being more lopsided. I remember it being a quicker fight. Wasn't really that quick. Went into the 4th round. I remember Khabib just dominating that. He did, but Conor had his moments. There were some moments where he was landing good shots and rocking Khabib, and unfortunately the wrestling and the grappling was just too much for Conor. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see a similar situation play out to what we saw in the Nate Diaz fight, where it is a bounce back. He's able to sort of correct the mistakes he made in the first fight and avenge that loss too. I wouldn't be surprised if that's how that plays out second time around. But again, even in the moment, a loss to Khabib Nurmagomedov, far from surprising, right? That's not a shocking loss in any way. But Cerrone is such a perfect fight for McGregor on a lot of levels, right? He's a game opponent. He's someone who's going to stand and bang with McGregor. He has a good grappling game, but he's said in interviews, and I tend to believe him, he wants to kickbox McGregor. He wants to make it an exciting fight for the fans. He's not interested in taking the easy route out necessarily. He wants to either prove that his striking can hang with McGregor's striking or get that post-fight bonus. I think he's one of those guys who would rather get a fight of the night bonus loss than win a boring fight, right? I think that's just who Cerrone is. And the dude's had 50 fights, right? So that's got to catch up to him at some point. You could argue it almost is catching up to him. He got knocked out in his last 2 fights. And before you start yelling at your screen, yeah, but those losses were to Justin Gaethje and Tony Ferguson. Yes. And yes, those guys are elite fighters, and it's certainly not embarrassing in any way to lose to those guys and even get knocked out by those guys. The 2 of the best fighters in the world right now. However, if you pull the curtain back a little further, he's lost 6 out of his last 10 fights, right? 6 out of his last 10. He went 40 professional fights, his first 40 professional fights, never losing back-to-back bouts. And yet, in these past 10 fights, he is currently working on his second 3-fight losing streak. Right? If he loses to Conor, that'll be 2 separate 3-fight losing streaks within the past 10 fights. right? So things have changed for Cerrone. He is slowing down. Even his demeanor in the press conference, I think Conor looks hungry. He looks focused. He looks humble. He looks like he's getting back to his roots for the first time, really, since he entered the UFC. I think, he did what he had to do to become the star that he is, but I do like to see him getting back to these roots. And then you have Cerrone, who, I don't know, he just looks happy to be there. He looks like he's going to enjoy the ride and have a good fight, and he's doing the whole cowboy thing. And I'm not saying he's not going to try to win, but I do think that between those two fighters, the one that's hungrier for a win right now is McGregor. Cerrone's going to get this paycheck. He's towards the end of his career. Yes, I guess technically he could beat McGregor, win a couple more, fight for a title, but I feel like he is on his way out. McGregor is trying to prove that he wasn't a flash in the pan, that he does have staying power. He seems reinvigorated and excited about the fight game again. And for me, just those demeanors, never mind the styles, never mind where they are in their careers, any of that stuff that I mentioned earlier, just the way they are going into this fight tells me that McGregor is ready to win. He's ready to get back out there. And I do believe him when he says he wants to stay active this year, win this fight, it's the start of a season, and then at least get 2 more fights in within the 2020 calendar year. So I'm excited for this one, but I do think that McGregor pulls it off. Because say what you want, and I love the guy, but this is not the Donald Cerrone that fought for the lightweight belt. This is not the Donald Cerrone that went on that run at welterweight. Not that this is a real welterweight fight. Basically, neither guy cut weight. But, this is not the Donald Cerrone that was in his prime. Even if you look at the promos for these, it's a lot of, look at all the stuff McGregor's accomplished, and then Cerrone's things are career accolades. Most wins, most knockouts, most whatever. All career accolades, not current accolades, not recent things, right? And I think that's telling in itself. Because as good as Cerrone is, and as much as I love the guy, these past 10 fights, he hasn't looked like this dominant killer that we've seen in the previous fights. There's been flashes of it, and like I said, anything can happen in MMA, you never know. But that's not who we're seeing. We're not seeing that Donald Cerrone. Although even I'll admit, there is something to be said about the fact that Cerrone's fought, it's actually wild, I had to double check the stat, he's fought 11 times since McGregor's last win. But forget all that. The point remains. Conor should win this fight. He should win early. He should win by knockout because he's a fast starter. Cerrone's traditionally a slow starter. I've heard that thrown out there a million times. That's not really set in stone either. Those things can change. But Conor should win this fight. He should. But he might not because that's what MMA is. And if Donald Cerrone wins this fight, which he is absolutely capable of doing, if he wins this fight, it would be, in my opinion, the first shocking loss of Conor McGregor's career. So that's it. That's all I got for you for the UFC 246 breakdown. Conor McGregor versus Donald Cerrone. Should be a heck of a fight. Very excited for it. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe to, I guess, this YouTube channel, to the MMA Mad podcast. We're going to be putting more stuff on the YouTube channel. The podcast has been around forever. If you're not listening to that, you absolutely should be. I get to interview, some of the best fighters, writers, and coaches in the world. It's been a hell of a journey. I've, loved every minute of it. Got a lot of cool opportunities. So if you are a fight fan, please listen to that, but definitely subscribe to this channel as well. And then I'm not exactly sure what we're going to be doing yet, but along with the Ratings Pending team, Jason and Daniel, I'm going to be doing a companion podcast. I think we're calling it a post-fight show, something basically immediately following the main event of UFC 246. We're going to get that video out there, or at least the audio or whatever. So just stay tuned, subscribe to everything. I'll keep you posted on Twitter. Once again, that's Nick Risner, NickRizner. DM me, question, comments, whatever you got. But that'll do it for this. So looking forward to the fight. I love both guys. I think Conor and Cowboy are pleasure to watch, fan favorites. I love the personalities, the sort of WWF, clashing of personalities and all that stuff. I love every part of it. So I'm excited for it. Rooting for a good fight. That's all I really want. Shout out to frequent podcast guest Raquel Pennington. Huge opportunity in the co-main facing Holly Holm. Pulling for her. So we'll see. That'll do it. Peace, guys. Enjoy the fights.